I am so excited about today's episode with a good friend of mine named Derek Frank, who is a bass player extraordinaire, and he has played with like some of the biggest names in really the pop industry and even in the country market. He's a bass player for Gwen Stefani. So if you've seen Gwen Stefani play in the last number of years, you've seen Derek on stage with her, as well as Shania Twain. So one of the biggest country artists of all time, right? He's also played for Daniel Powter, Air Supply. He's played bass for the Dancing with the Stars band, tons of others. He has a new record out called 11 Years Later. And I'm so happy to have you on talking with us, Derek.
Well, man, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
You as well. So let's talk first about your record, 11 Years Later. And I'm assuming, I don't know, but I'm going to assume that 11 years later means this is 11 years later after the last album.
Yeah. So my first album I put out in 2009. And it just, took me 11 years to finally put something else out. Yeah.
And the funny thing is I listened to the last record. I actually had that in my car for a while, and it still cycles into my car. But one of my favorite tracks on that is the modern version of Number Pinball that you did.
Oh, Pinball Number Count. Yeah. The Sesame Street tune that was done by the Pointer Sisters. Yeah, that was fun doing that. Prior to that album, we had a friend over and we were just somehow we got on the subject of Sesame Street and like what we remembered from Sesame Street growing up. We were talking about the music and we were just saying, oh, I wonder if any of that stuff's on YouTube. So we started looking on YouTube and I was like, I wonder if the pinball song's on there. Remember that thing, Yeah. And so of course it is, and I hadn't heard the song since I was a little kid. I was listening. I was like, man, that is a funky track. Super cool, and so then when it came time to do the record, I'm thinking of cool covers that I can put on the record. I'm like, you know what? I'm doing Pinball Number Count.
Right. Yeah. The funny thing is growing up, you never think of the intricacies of that, but I remember when I listened to that on the record, I was like, oh my gosh, the musicianship on this is just ferocious. And then I ended up getting on YouTube and I watched an older version, like the original version that of course we grew up listening to. Yeah. And again, I had that same thought. This is unbelievable musicianship for a kid's show.
Yeah. I mean, it's all these odd time signatures, like that tune has like probably 4 different time signatures in it. It's so wild. And I didn't even know it was the Pointer Sisters. Like they were, they were like session singers before they became the Pointer Sisters, and that was just probably some, I forget who wrote it, but it's probably just some session they got called for, Hey, we're doing the song for a kid's show,
Yeah. And Pinball Number Count. But so the new record, you have a bunch of live videos out on that, which are phenomenal videos. I encourage anyone who's listening to check out the videos. But you recorded those live, and again, same thing. Just the musicianship on your album and on the songs is unbelievable.
Gotta say, I've got a good band. I got some good guys in to play that stuff. I've got my buddy Joshua Ray Gooch on guitar, who is my bandmate with Shania. I've got Randy Cook on drums. We've done a handful of gigs around town and stuff, but he's played with tons of people. Ty Bailey is on keys. His main gig these days is Katy Perry. I couldn't have been happier with how everybody played on the record. And then when we took it into the studio to do those live videos, it's just a great combination of players. And,
right.
Yeah, proud of it.
You've had since I've known you, which I met you back in 2003. You were one of the first people I met when I moved to Los Angeles. Yeah. You've had a long run playing with a wide range of artists.
It's definitely been all over the place over the years. Like every gig is a little different,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, stylistically, and I mean, to go from like a Shania to like Mindy Bear, right, and Air Supply and whatnot. But what I always like to dig into is really the mindset and the actions that successful musicians have taken and applied to get to that point. So as you've gone from gig to gig and artist to artist over the years, what is one of the things that you are how do you constantly add value to basically the Derek Frank brand, so that the next artist who's in a different genre, like Shania Twain, who's, nothing like Gwen Stefani, how do you add value to what you do so that you constantly get in the mix to get those gigs?
Well, I just try to be authentic with every style I play. I mean, for as long as I've been a musician, I've been into different styles of music, and I've dug into them, and I've tried to learn the intricacies and nuances and appreciate all the different aspects of different styles of music. And, just because I love listening to different styles of music and playing it, I try to bring authenticity to it. If I'm playing a country gig, I want to approach it like a country bass player. I want to get into that mindset. Same thing if I'm playing a rock gig. If I'm playing with Gwen and we're playing No Doubt tunes, I want to embody Tony Kanal as much as I can. I want to get into the intricacies and figure out from a bass standpoint what makes it work and what makes it great. And so maybe that's just it. I just try to be authentic with it stylistically, and I don't know. Versatility has always been kind of my thing, just because I just love playing different styles of music, and I never set out to be a rock guy. I never set out to be an R&B guy. I never set out to be a country guy, but I figure that whatever styles of music I get called to play, I just want to do them as well as I can,
Right. And that's kind of one of the whole aspects of continuously like adding value, is that not necessarily formal education, as opposed to just constantly listening and learning, techniques that other players are playing. Because a bass player in country music is going to play completely different than, bass player in No Doubt.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, when I started playing with Shania back in 2015, I really hadn't done much country at all. I hadn't listened to much of it. I just really wasn't exposed to it. But as soon as I got that gig, we'd have half our band was from Nashville, and there were guys that just grew up playing country and bluegrass and things like that. And we were like on the bus, and I just asked them, like, turn me on to some stuff. What should I listen to? How do I dig into country music and really get this? Because like, I'm on a country gig now. Like, I need to know where it came from, and get into that mindset. Although, I mean, of course, Shania is a crossover. It's pop and country, and it definitely has a lot of rock elements to it, with all the, Mutt Lange production and whatnot. I just, I wanted to be exposed to that kind of music, so some of the Nashville guys in the band just like turned me on to a lot of music we listened to on the bus. And ever since then, I listened to country quite a bit. I put on some of the country stations on Sirius XM when I'm in the car, and I've learned to really appreciate a lot of the value in that music.
Aside from obviously, playing the technical side of playing with both, say, Gwen Stefani and Shania, there's also the performance aspect that plays a huge role in those shows. Mm-hmm. How much of that is something that I would say maybe I'll ask it like, how much of that is something that came natural versus how much of that is something that you had to work on to continue on with those gigs?
Well, it's kind of both, I mean, I grew up watching MTV and being into like a lot of those bands that are just, running around the stage like crazy, a lot of the 80s hair bands and stuff like that. And so like, it's always kind of your rock and roll fantasy to be on a big stage like that, and be able to run around and perform and be a rock star. There's like part of that that's just like, that's just fun. And it just comes natural because I've watched it so much. But, a lot of that came from me, just, I don't know, playing in cover bands over the years, and some of the cover bands would be more active on stage. Some of it we'd even do like some choreography and stuff, and I'd get in on it because it all just adds to the show. It all adds to the entertainment factor of the show. So part of it is me consciously wanting to perform and put on a show that's like where there's a visual aspect as well as musical. Mm-hmm. Part of it is conscious, and a part of it is just also, it's just like the fun aspect of it. It's just like me turning into a kid again, and trying to embody what I used to watch on MTV as a kid, And it's just fun. It's like when you're up on a huge stage in an arena and you've got fire behind you and you've got pyro on stage, you can't just stand there and look at your shoes while you're playing. It's not appropriate. But if you're running around and you got your bass up in the air like that, that fits, So no matter what gig I'm doing, I'm thinking, how do I fit musically, but also, visually, because it's entertainment, and for some of the pop gigs that I've been doing, like that's kind of part of the gig, if I just kind of stood there and looked at the ground, I wouldn't be the right guy for the gig, but then you always have to kind of be aware of what the rest of the band is doing and what the artist is doing and find a way to fit to where it's appropriate. Because there's some gigs where, you can't be like Flea out there just totally thrashing around. Like that might not be appropriate, but neither is just standing in one place and looking at the ground. So you kind of have to figure out how you fit in this to be appropriate and make the show good,
Right. So when you, let's go back to when you were first starting out, because you went to school in Miami, right? Mm-hmm. And then you moved out to Los Angeles, correct? Yeah. So when you were first, we'll say a newbie, starting out in your career, because I think, mindset is so important, right? The mindset, our actions follow our mindset, When you started your career, how did you look at opportunities, finding opportunities? What were the strategies that you applied to start finding those, for example, like say a cover gig, to get in with a cover gig and whatnot? How did you approach it with your mindset? And then how did your actions follow that?
Well, I always knew that it was about your relationships with people and your network. I mean, I hate calling it like networking. That's what people call it. But I mean, it's all about just meeting more musicians and just kind of expanding your circle. So when I first moved to town, I would go out all the time, try to meet as many musicians as possible. It's just basically just like making friends. You're just making friends with musicians. I would also cold call people. This is way before social media. Internet was a thing, but not on the level it is now. So like people would give me a phone number of some great musicians. They're like, oh, you should call so and so. So I would just cold call people and be like, hey, my name's Derek Frank. I just moved to town, got your number from so and so, and just looking to meet some musicians. So I started doing that. And that just turned into me getting to know some people. If I talk to somebody on the phone, they're like, oh, well, I'm playing at so-and-so club, come check it out, come say hello. And that could maybe turn into like, oh, come sit in, and I'd sit in and then get to know more musicians that way. I just tried to just kind of build personal relationships with as many musicians as possible, because, if nobody knows you, no one can call you for gigs. So I just tried to get to know as many people as possible. And that, eventually led to me just kind of working in the local scene, doing, cover gigs and singer-songwriter gigs and sessions and all that,
I hear from a lot of musicians who I talk to, who their excuse for not taking that action or getting on the phone or making, cold calls or whatever is well, I don't want to, annoy someone, or I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to get in someone's way. And of course, my first thought is, well, if you're asking them to, take you out to a steak dinner, then of course that's not going to go so well. But it's all really in the approach. And if you approach it from the standpoint of, I just want to make a connection and hopefully make a friend, then your actions are going to follow suit, and you're not going to be taken as being a burden.
Yeah, because you're not calling somebody and right off the bat saying like, hey, you got any gigs for me? Because obviously, like, you cold call somebody, they don't know you, they know nothing about you. They're not going to be offering you gigs, but you're just saying hello and meeting people, and I think that's just the start of it, And then eventually you can get to know people on a musical level. You might end up playing with them somehow, sitting in whatever it is. But I mean, you can't really have that mentality. I've always been proactive in everything I've done. I've always tried to make things happen for myself. I never wanted to just sit by the phone and hope that someone called, I've always tried to seek out opportunities, and, you have to do it in a way that's not annoying, because obviously we've seen those people that are annoying that do come in hot like that. And they're like, hey, I just moved to town. Let me know if you have any gigs for me. It's like, well, don't start with that.
Yeah.
Don't lead with that.
Yeah, well, because it's not leading with any type of it's the what you can do for me approach, as opposed to like what can I actually being authentic and whatnot, and that's just a turn off, no matter if it's music or any industry. But it's interesting because and this too, as you look at the circle of musicians in your world who are all successful, there is a common aspect to them, and one of the common aspects to them is that they're just proactive.
Yeah. Of course. And we all have different ways of doing it. There's no right or wrong way, really. Everybody's got a different approach, which is interesting in listening to some of these podcasts and things, is that, there is a common thread, but also everybody approached it maybe with a slight different thing. Everybody's path was slightly different, but basically in the same, same genre, if you will,
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think of like the NFL, the vast majority of players in the NFL go through the same process, right? They go through college, they go to what
Scout
they call the combine, and they go into the draft and whatnot.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone kind of goes through that same process to get into an NFL team. Music, there is no one process, I don't think, that's been repeated.
Nope. It's always different, but the one common thread is that it's word of mouth. It's all who basically. Most of the kind of bigger gigs I've gotten have just been because somebody recommended me. Somebody knew me. It wasn't like some cattle call thing. It was just like, oh, somebody threw my name in the hat, and that's from me getting to know musicians,
Right. If it's kind of getting to the point now where a lot of music, you don't have to live in the big quote unquote music industry towns so much anymore. It's kind of becoming, people are connecting, so much offline, or not, I should say not offline, online, away from the, personal one-to-one interaction.
Sure.
What would be your advice to someone who is just starting out in their music career? And it could be any aspect of their music career, whether it's songwriting, whether it's, being a musician, player behind an artist or whatnot, someone who just wants to produce. What would be your advice to them when it comes to not necessarily networking, but connecting?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say first, social media and internet presence plays such a big role in it these days. Have a website that has like a bio, maybe some performance videos, some, photos, song samples, things like that. Of course, if somebody's just starting out, they're not going to have a lot of content yet necessarily, but just have something so people can look you up, especially if your name is thrown in the hat for a gig. That musical director or artist or producer or whatever it is, they're going to want to like Google you and like check you out on the line before they meet you in person, before they see you at a live audition. So you got to have somewhere to direct people online. So it's an Instagram, it's a YouTube, it's a website. I think it's good to start there, but then get to know people, personally. Like I don't know, maybe I'm old school, but I'm still a big fan of just human to human connection, human interaction. I don't think there's anything that really replaces that. I think having the internet presence is a secondary thing, but I think just, building relationships in real life is number one. But then, of course, like I said, somebody throws your name in the hat for a gig, that artist, before they call you into audition or jam with you or whatever it is, they're going to want to look you up. So it's good to have something out there so people can, see you and hear you a little bit first.
Right. Now, obviously, you've spent a lot of time on developing the skill set of being a phenomenal bass player who can play
thank you.
a wide variety of genres and styles very well. What about some of the other skill sets that you've developed over the years, like recording at home or whatnot? What are some of the other skill sets that you've developed that maybe 20 years ago was not even something even on the radar, but now you look at it and you go, this is just as imperative to my long-term viability as a musician as the skill set of playing bass.
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely home recording, like you said. I think these days everybody needs some kind of home recording rig, and it's really, you don't you don't need a lot of stuff these days. You don't need to spend a ton of money to like get good sounds, but you just need to be able to, record yourself at home so that, because, when people are recording stuff these days, especially because people are kind of all over the world and we can connect online. Most sessions are remote these days. I mean, there's still some things done in big recording studios, but, as a kind of remote session player, most of my session work comes from people outside of LA that just send me tracks.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that I think everybody needs to do, just have some sort of home studio. And, it's a huge rabbit hole. There's so much gear you can get and so many different approaches you can have. And mine is, mine gets tweaked every now and then, I do mic and amp. I've got an old Ampeg B15 that I do mic. I like to be old school that way. I've got some tube DIs, but I also use a Kemper profiler. I've got that kind of right here at my desk, ready to go. I've got a good Apogee Symphony desktop interface. But I don't really have a lot of outboard gear. I've kind of downsized a little bit just because like the Apogee, the mic pre's that are built into it and the compressors and the channel strip, it's all great. Yeah. So it's like you don't need to have a ton of outboard gear. You don't need that refrigerator rack full of stuff anymore, But yeah, home recording is a big thing. Just being a versatile player, background vocals, that's something that 20 years ago I really didn't have together. And of course, I knew for many years that was always a plus, but I don't know. I just never worked on vocals until I started with Shania, and then I saw how important that was for all of us to sing. And that's when I really dove into that and really started working hard on vocals.
Those are some big shoes as far as background vocals to fill with the Mutt Lange background vocals.
Oh yeah, they're so intricate,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing is that like, she was well established before I joined the band. And so they just sent me kind of an isolated vocal track of the bass player before me. So I knew what parts to learn. I learned his parts. And then in rehearsals, because the band had changed a little bit, we tweaked things a little bit, like reassigned a few parts here and there, but that was my starting point. Yeah. Cause otherwise, this stuff's intricate. Like to try to pick out a part, there's a lot of layers there,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But that's kind of when I really jumped into it, and I'm glad I did. And I would give any young player that advice: just work on your vocals. It's an instrument like anything else. I used to think that like, oh, I'm just not a singer. It's like you have it or you don't. But no, it's an instrument like anything else. If you put hours into it, you're going to improve. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that, and then just try to keep up with current trends as much as you can. As far as like instruments, for me, it's years ago I got into playing synth bass because that was a very valuable skill to have. Like I've played synth bass on a lot of my gigs now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember seeing you break out the synth bass back in the day on a bunch of the local gigs. And
yeah,
there wasn't. I remember this is probably back in like 2006, 2007. I don't recall ever seeing any other bass player before you, at least with all the gigs that I've gone to, playing synth bass, who wasn't like in a big band or like mm-hmm. in a No Doubt level type of band, Uh-huh. But I remember seeing you break out the synth bass. I thought, man, that's he's kind of ahead of his time with that thing.
Well, I just looked at it as practice. I used to do all these cover gigs and stuff, wedding gigs and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, people used to say like sometimes like, man, I can't believe you're bringing all this gear to this gig. I'm like, well, I want to be authentic with it. We're playing all this current stuff and also some 70s stuff that's synth based. And it's a way for me to practice it, because I may not sit at home for hours and hours practicing synth bass, but I'll bring it to a gig and that'll be my practice, Yeah. And so that's how I looked at it. It's just like, okay, this cover gig is not like, this is a means to an end. This isn't like me doing these cover gigs. I haven't made it. This is like what I'm doing in order to get to the gigs I want to do. So how do I use this as a way to practice and hone my skill sets and get better as a musician? And that was just one way to like bring the synth. And then, whenever we learn new tunes, I would program the synth sound. So I learned how to program, and then I would, play it on the gig, and that was practice, and that kind of got me ready for the bigger gigs that I really wanted to do.
Yeah. So I like how you said, I haven't made it. And I think that that's an interesting phrase. I hope you make it. It's always interesting when people would say that to me when I was growing up. I hope you make it. And I thought, what does making it mean? But it really makes you think about, like, what is that definition of success, right? Because success means something different to everyone. Yeah. So playing in a cover band, y'all haven't made it. But I'm curious, now that theoretically we could all say that you've made it, what does being a successful musician look like to you? What is that definition of having made it mean to you?
Well, I wouldn't say that I've made it, because I will say that I've done a lot of the things that I've set out to do, and I'm happy with that. But I wouldn't say I made it. I think that I don't think any musician will say, "Oh, I've made it,"
Right.
Unless they're like ready to retire. They've been in some huge band and, they're in their 70s and they're kind of done. They're like, okay, you know what? I made it,
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's just success for me is just, and I've said this from the get-go, it's playing good music with good people and getting paid for it, being able to make a living doing it. That's success. So I feel like I've had some success and it's been good and I'm extremely grateful for it, but I want to keep doing things. I have further goals. I want to do, a lot more stuff. And I'd really like to keep doing the things I'm doing, like playing with an artist like Gwen and Shania, and then doing my own thing, releasing my own music on the side as, just for artistic purposes,
Right.
I want to keep doing that, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to say I've made it,
Right. I don't think that it actually exists, because the bar always changes. Because once you have that gig, once you've done something, that just becomes, it's part of your life. It's your life story. And so then you start thinking of, well, what's the next goal? And the next goal doesn't even have to be a musical goal, but the reality is that just because you get to a certain point doesn't mean that everything shuts off and you're like, well, now I'm just going to sit by the pool and get fat. You know what I mean?
But maybe for some people that is it. Like, maybe they get to a point where they've done everything they want to do and then they're done. But I think most musicians, like you said, the goals keep changing. The goalposts keep moving. It's like, okay, I've done this and now I want to do this, or I want to do more of this, or,
It's very difficult to imagine the goalposts not continuing to move.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, of course.
Yeah. So let's kind of, you were talking about tracking at home and whatnot, but I kind of want to dive back into your record, cool. Because you've filmed a bunch of videos of some of these songs, tracking them live in the studio with the band, and that to me is exciting, because that music is a team sport. And I always feel that the best music, you can tell when you listen to music and it's a bunch of guys or girls sitting in a room together, looking at each other through the glass and playing with each other, listening to each other and laying it down and following the energy. There's something that's so tangible in those types of recordings versus something where it's like, hey, I'll send you the track and you play bass, and then send it back to me and I'll send it to my buddy and he's going to play drums. And it just kind of goes through the circle. I mean, that stuff can sound fantastic, but there's a whole other energy when you listen to recordings that are done live. And so you've been documenting that with a bunch of videos, and I'd love for you to tell us about those.
Well, first of all, thanks for recognizing that, because that's exactly how I feel. I mean, as a session player who's done things both ways, I've been in studios playing with people live, and I've done plenty of remote recording where people send tracks back and forth. I will say this, I enjoy playing live with people in a room together way better than just like going back and forth, and sending tracks. I've always, like you said, music is a team sport. I've always been a fan of the interaction and the conversation between musicians playing together. So I just kind of figured when it was time to do my record, that's how I wanted to do it. And that's how we did it. We had, the core band is a 4-piece band, and we recorded in the same room together so we could look at each other, and cue each other and things like that. I wanted it to have that vibe, that chemistry. So that's what we did in the studio. We had a few overdubs here and there, but for the most part, it's just that core 4-piece band. We did do some horn section overdubs and a couple guests and things like that. But for the most part, 4-piece band. And so then, because we couldn't do gigs still, because I very much want this to be a live band kind of thing. There's an excitement in that, and that's what I want to do with this. But because of the pandemic, we haven't been able to play live. So I just kind of figured, you know what, let's just go into the studio and just play live and just kind of release the videos. I didn't want to do the live stream concert thing because I don't know, I'm just, for some reason, I just haven't been into that. I haven't been into watching many of them, and I just didn't want to do it myself. So I'm like, let's just go in and like record a few videos, and we'll release them from time to time just to, put out some content here and there, So that's what we did. We just recorded 5 songs, just did a day in the studio and recorded them, and just like, live 4-piece band playing together. And it was really fun to do. And the videos turned out great. And we still have another one to release at some point.
Hey, I just want to jump in here for a second and let you know that if any of your goals over the next year include recording and releasing a new album, generating placements of your songs on TV shows and films, or just building a fan base that will sustain your music career, I want to invite you to my special workshop, Real Musicians Don't Starve. Now, in this workshop, we're going to focus on the 3 keys that are essential to your success. And you're going to walk away with an extremely powerful strategy that allows you to create your own wow factor. And this gives you the power to attract musical opportunities to you instead of constantly struggling and chasing after them. Now, you can check out this workshop for free at realmusiciansdon'tstarve.com/workshop. And once again, that's realmusiciansdon'tstarve.com/workshop. Now, back to the podcast. One of the really cool things, actually, I think in particular about your stuff is that you're allowing all the musicians that you play with to, really run with their own sections and take solos and you're showcasing them. And that's another reason why I think watching those videos and just the stuff that you're creating in and of itself is so fun to listen to, because and why that's so important live, laying it down live, because it's a whole other thing when you're, again, like when you're standing in a room together and someone's blowing a solo while the rest of the band is playing, and there's that energy that you just cannot capture, when you're standing in a in basically a spare bedroom in your house, by yourself hitting record. Sure. And so that's that, if you're a musician and you want to listen to some just awesome groove, funky, kick-ass music, then you definitely have to go check out, at the very least, the videos that Derek has up. But definitely his CD 11 years later. Where can people go to listen to the videos or to watch the videos?
The videos are on my YouTube channel. It's just youtube.com/Derek Frank, and they're right up there. They're like the most recent things I've released. So that's where the videos are. I've got them on my Instagram as well. I've got some clips and I've got some full like IGTV videos, but go to YouTube, watch them on your full computer with your monitors on or headphones on, don't just watch them on your phone and listen through your phone's crappy speaker, Yeah.
and it's awesome watching them. And I am hanging on this for a second, just because I think this is just so important for musicians to watch, because you're also seeing, while they're playing, you're seeing like the slight cues, and your videographer was able to capture that stuff, wonderfully. Everyone kind of cueing each other. Okay, when my section's starting, when this section's over, and your turn to solo, and then okay, my solo's wrapping up, and how it comes back around to the head of the song, and it's just fun to watch that go down, because it literally is like sitting at a really cool, like jazz club. But it's not jazz, obviously, but like just a really cool, like live music club, watching a bunch of musicians really play off of each other really well.
Well, thanks for watching in that detail and noticing that, because that is the thing. Like the solo sections, they're not all set lengths. It's someone solos and then cues the next guy, cues when his solo's over, I love that aspect of just the conversation, and with my stuff, it's definitely not a bass album. I didn't want to make a bass album. I don't listen to a lot of bass albums. I'm just like, there aren't many bass solos on my record. It's my record and I wrote the tunes, but it's not like it's all about me. I want it to just be a band vibe because these players are my favorite players. I love listening to them. I love playing with them. I love just being a foundational bass player underneath their ripping solos,
Yeah.
That I love that. I mean, I'm a foundational bass player by trade for the most part. I'm a foundational bass player that occasionally gets to play some solos and some extra notes here and there, but I'm not like one of those just like shredder solo bass guys,
right?
Yeah.
And again, another cool thing about it is like all the players that are on it are all heavy hitters who have tons of big credits to their own name, who've played with lots of big artists. And I think that's another aspect to seeing, like, you see these guys, maybe, like Randy just kind of laying down a great groove behind an artist, but now you're actually able to see, who he really is as a drummer and why he's been able to get so many high level gigs that he's had.
His pocket is just insane, and his parts, and he's a joy to be around, but yeah, that's the thing. I didn't really want to dictate to these guys what to play. I called them because I love what they do. And so, the demos that I sent the guys were just kind of rough sketches. And I said, let's have a few rehearsals and see what you guys think. Cause I respect their opinions. I respect their musicianship, their ideas. So, I just wanted to have a band vibe, and I wanted each of them to put their stamp on it. I didn't want to be like, Randy, this is your drum part. I programmed it and I want you to play it exactly as I programmed it. There was like none of that. I on purpose in my demos didn't do a lot of meticulous drum programming. I would just like put up a loop there, and I would just be like, don't really pay attention to the loop. I think even on a couple of the demos, I just took the drum loop out because I didn't want it to get stuck in Randy's head. Because, we get what they call demoitis sometimes, where like you hear someone's demo and you get so locked into whatever part they played, it's hard to get away from that. So I think on some of the demos that I sent Randy, I just put a click and just took the drum part, my drum loop out, because I just want to see what he came up with,
Right. So I have two more questions, and then we'll wrap up. And the first one is, as the reality is, the music industry is, as much as we talk about the successes, the reality is that the music industry there's a lot more no's.
Oh yeah.
And after a while, after you hear a bunch of no's, it can be difficult, Sure. What are some of the strategies that you've implemented throughout your career to stay focused and stay on track during those times of rejection, or when you've gotten the no's, or you auditioned for a gig but didn't get it and whatnot?
Well, that's obviously never happened to me.
Of course, never.
I've never heard the word no. No, I'm just kidding. I joke about it. Sometimes people will say like, man, like your resume is great. You've played with a lot of great people. I'm like, well, you should see the list of people that I auditioned for and who didn't hire me. Like that list is way more impressive than the list of gigs I actually got. So yeah, like I've auditioned for tons of stuff, and you're not always going to get it. And you just got to, I've just tried to, every time I didn't get a gig, I tried to learn from that experience and figure out why. And a lot of times you can't, it's just the artist picks who they pick for whatever reason. A lot of times it's casting or whatever, but still, I always try to leave those situations saying, okay, what could I have done differently? What could I have done better? Mm-hmm. So that's that. But also, like, as far as, during those times where I'm not doing a big gig, I just try to keep my schedule full. I like to play. So I like to fill up my calendar if I'm not on a big tour and I'm kind of like in between, road gigs or whatever it is. I'll do cover gigs in town. I'll do, fun little club gigs. I'll play with some singer-songwriters. I'll go try to sit in places. I'll just go out and hear music. I'll go out and I used to go to a lot of the jam sessions around town. I don't so much do that anymore just because it doesn't turn me on that much. There's a lot of unnecessary notes and, too much aggressive networking that like, I don't know. I'm at a point in my life. I've been in LA for like 24 years now. And I don't know. I get a little burnt on that scene. So I don't do the jam session stuff that much anymore, but I love to just go hear people play, and I think by doing that, you're showing your face around town. You're reminding people you're around because they might be like, oh, I thought you were on the road. It's like, no, I'm back. Oh, cool. Hey, I got this gig next week, So there's that. There's just like going out to remind people you're around. And also I just love to go hear music, So yeah, I just try to stay busy, if I know that I've got something else coming up in a few weeks, then maybe I'll try to chill. Maybe I'll try to take advantage of the time to just be home with Annette and, just chill out. But a lot of times I'm just trying to figure out, what the best use of my time is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but you mentioned Annette. Derek's wife is an unbelievable singer as well. So she was also one of the very first people I met when actually I met her before I met you.
Yeah, we met you shortly after you moved to town. Was that, I forget who that was through.
It was initially through Wes.
Through Wes, okay.
Yeah.
And then we played together with Carrie Kimmel.
Yeah.
I think you
actually played the very first time I ever played. You played bass the very first time I ever played the Whiskey A Go Go. And,
oh wow!
And as an 80s hair metal, growing up with the 80s hair metal, that was such a poignant moment for me. Now, granted, we're playing there with a pop girl, right? But like, oh my gosh, we're playing the Whiskey A Go Go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you played bass.
That's funny. That's cool. I think I felt the same way the first time I played the Whiskey. And actually, I don't remember who I played the Whiskey with the first time. I don't remember, but after a few gigs at the Whiskey, I got kind of turned off by it because it is kind of a bullshit Hollywood scene. And, like there were many things that annoyed me about playing the Whiskey. But like, yeah, the first time it's like, this is an iconic stage. Like so many people have played here and gotten their start here. But that's funny that I was on your first Whiskey gig.
Was the thing that annoyed you about the Whiskey the fact that the second you were done, the stage hands threw your gear out on the freaking sidewalk when you were done, right by the front door?
Pretty much, it's like that. Yeah, some of those bouncers are hardcore, and they just remember them hassling the bands more than protecting them. And you're kind of like, dude, you're here to like protect us, you're not here to hassle the bands. But it's become like that because at a club where they've got 7 bands playing in a night, it's just you're a dime a dozen to the staff there. I just remember I've gotten arguments with bouncers there before. I've gotten stuff stolen from the stage there before. I've been there before with Annette, my wife, and like showed up and like they're trying to get me to pay a cover charge for her. I'm like, she's my wife. Like, stupid shit like that.
Yeah.
Having to, getting no discount on parking, just, all of that stuff. There's all this kind of stuff. And for a while I had a no whiskey policy because I think one of those nights when like, a sound guy was telling me to get on stage and then a bouncer was telling me that I needed to leave the club and come back and check in and all shit. I'm like, dude, the sound guy's telling me to get on stage. And the bouncer was just like arguing with me because I wasn't doing it his way. And the sound guy's like, I need him on stage now. And finally the bouncer was like, okay. And I remember I was like, you know what? Fuck this place. I don't, and I think that same night I got something stolen from the stage. I was just like, man, I'm never playing here again. And I can't remember I'm sure I've played there since then. Yeah, I definitely have. Yeah. But for a while it was just like, man, this place.
The good old days of schlepping gear down on Sunset Boulevard.
And it's like, I used to do that so much, like, cause for many, many years, I was just playing in so many different bands, so many different singer-songwriters, just being, the hired gun, playing with everybody around town. So I was always playing like the Rainbow, the Whiskey, the Mint, the Roxy, there was a club called the Gig.
The Gig was one of my favorite places to play down there.
The Gig was cool. Yeah. There were 2 gigs. There was one in West LA and one on Melrose.
The one on Melrose was one of my favorite places to play. It always
that was a cool
good
spot
to me.
Yeah. I liked playing the Gig. That was a good spot. There are a lot of cool clubs. Troubadour. I still love playing the Troubadour. Mm-hmm. Troubadour is like probably my favorite rock club. Hotel Cafe is always great because the quality of people they have play there is always great. Like you can go there on any given night and you're going to hear somebody good. Yeah. So like, there's some venues like that are just more artist friendly. The Sunset Strip stuff is like more kind of like, the dime a dozen bands, but I've had some great nights at the Viper Room. I'd say the Viper Room is probably my favorite of the Sunset Strip places. Yeah.
I think I agree with you on that one. The Viper Room was always fun to play.
Yeah.
So I have one final question for you. And this is one that I always ask everyone. I always think it's interesting to get different people's perspective of it. But especially as we've gotten older and we've kind of can look back on our careers and just life as a whole, with a different perspective. If you could go and have coffee with yourself at 20 years old, sit across the table and give yourself 2 pieces of advice speaking to your younger 20-year-old self, what would they be?
I would say, first of all, keep your eyes and ears open. Like, be observant of everything going on around you. Be observant of what people are doing to get the gigs you want to get, what they're doing to stay on those gigs, what their skill sets are. That includes playing wise, gear wise, performance wise, image wise. I didn't know how to dress when I moved to LA. It took me a while to figure that out, to like look at people, be like, oh yeah, they're actually putting thought into what they wear on stage, Yeah. So I'd say that, just be observant, like keep your eyes and ears open, that's what I always try to do,
Yeah.
that, and, work on your singing,
Okay.
Get that together. If you're not already singing backups, work on it. Make that like a big part of your skill set.
Wow. Two amazing answers.
Well, those are just two things that I didn't do early on, that nobody told me early on, that I had to figure out eventually. Mm-hmm. I think the singing thing, people did tell me that early on, and I just didn't listen.
Right.
I think, and also I wasn't thrown into it. I wasn't really on too many gigs where I needed to sing. I mean, you remember some of the cover gigs I used to do with like MVPs and stuff like that. We'd have a front line of like three or four singers. So I was just never asked to sing. It was never required of me.
Right.
And we were talking about the synth-based thing, how that's something I used cover bands to work on that as practice. Like, I could have used cover bands to practice vocals, and a lot of people do. A lot of musicians that you'll talk to, they got their singing together because they were in cover bands where they needed to sing. It was a 4-piece band and everybody needed to sing. And so that's how they got together. I didn't. My cover bands were always bigger bands where I didn't need to sing. But I would tell people early on, like, that's a very valuable skill set to have.
Right. I just love that you got your singing together when you had to sing Mutt Lange tracks.
Yeah, I mean, that's what finally did it. It's like, okay, it's time to step it up,
That's
and
amazing.
I had one of those, the Brett Manning singing success course. Yeah. Which is just, it's a bunch of MP3s. I had them on my iPod, while we were still using iPods. And, and man, I took vocal lessons before that tour. I practiced for hours, and even on the tour, like before the gigs, like, in between soundcheck and the gig, I would find some quiet part of the arena, some hallway or something somewhere. And I would just go, do that, do those vocal exercises. It's an instrument you just need to practice.
I worked with an artist here in town who was working with Brett Manning, who's a vocal coach for those who don't know, in Nashville, and worked with a lot of huge artists. And we actually went to his office, and I was playing guitar for her, just kind of working with her.
Cool.
And seeing him in action and what he was able to do with her just in that 1 hour session was unbelievable.
Wow.
Absolutely unbelievable. Especially as she got higher, she kind of got a little bit more, weaker in her voice. And by the end of that hour, she was just on fire, and it was amazing watching him get that out of her. So, I've worked with a vocal coach previously as well, and I'm a big advocate for, working with coaches in general, but vocal coaches, when you work with a great vocal coach, I've fortunately been around two in my career, and to be able to see what they can do with a vocalist in a short amount of time is just unbelievable.
It's cool. Yeah, because they'll point out things that you're not thinking about,
Yeah. And just
Physical
even the exercises, just even the exercise, how they get you to really open up your throat and really, expand your range, even, by a couple of notes. But a couple of notes is enough, especially when you're getting up to some really high notes. But man,
absolutely.
So
yeah.
I always love to end my podcast with our manifesto, and that is that real musicians are business owners, and our business is music. That's what Derek and I have been talking about through a lot of this episode. And a business is simply an organization where value is provided in order to make a profit. And unlike starving musicians who operate with a mindset of scarcity and fear, as success-driven musicians, we operate with a mindset of abundance, confidence, and service. We are doers, we are dreamers, we are creators, and we are achievers. We know that our true value is determined by how many people we serve and how well we serve them, because our truth is that real musicians don't starve.
I love that. I need to print that out and put that up on my wall. Look at that and look at that every day, Seriously, that's great. That's great I mean, it's a great manifesto, as you say. Like, yeah,
Thanks.
I love that.
I'll send you a copy.
That's really cool, and it's true. Yeah. We are dreamers, we're doers, we're achievers.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're creators.
It starts creators, but it starts with us being dreamers.
Yeah.
It
all does. It all starts with the dream, and then getting the mindset that we can do it, developing the skill set, and then taking the purposeful actions that allow us to accomplish the goals.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Derek, I appreciate you joining me and sharing a wealth of information with everyone today.
Well, thanks for having me. Good chatting with you.
Where can so we covered the YouTube channel. Where can people go to learn more about you and what you have going on?
DerekFrank.com. That's DerekFrank.com. And I've got all my social links up there. I've got all the album links up there. I will keep my gig calendar up there when there is actually a gig calendar to post, which hopefully will be soon. We're doing this interview in May 2021. So, we're all starting to hear about some things happening again. So I'm hoping that by the fall I'll be back on the road and back in Vegas with Gwen and Shania. So I will have my calendar up there, and that's where you can connect with me.
Awesome, Derek. Well, this has been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Absolutely.